Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to discuss slope, average rate of change, and how this works with derivatives and how this all ties into what we'll be covering in this unit. Okay, so this first part is really just review. Okay, this is talking about how to find the slope or the average rate of change. Okay, but it's good to sort of review this and get this fresh so that as we look at our derivatives, we can see how this information ties together. So if you look at this graph, okay, that we're given down here, this P of X function, okay, and we're going to be working on finding the average rate of change between different points here, okay? So, but let's start with just reviewing that if we have a slope or average rate of change that's positive, we always say that the function is increasing. If our slope or average rate of change is negative, then we say the function is decreasing between those 2 points. If our slope is 0, that is a horizontal distance between those 2 points, which means the outputs are not changing, okay? So like if the outputs, you got 2 points and the output values are the same, then the slope between those will be 0 because there's no rise or between the 2 points. They're at the same level. And we always use output over input as our units from the slope and how we interpret that. So let's talk about how this all ties together here. Okay, so let's go back to this P of X function. And it's telling us that P of X is profit, okay, and that's in dollars, okay? So that's a unit we need to think about. X is the number of days, okay, since the product was released. That's another unit. All right, and it says find the average rate of change between 0 and 1, those input values of 0 and 1. So what we're going to do first is we're going to just look at our graph, okay, over here. And let me see if it'll let me zoom in. Okay, so an X value of 0, I'm right here on the graph. Okay, and then an X value of 1, I am, let's see, here's 1, I'll mark that there, all right, that's going to be halfway between 0 and 2, obviously, and I'm at that spot on the graph, okay, and then if I look at how these 2 points are changing, okay, then what I'm doing here is I'm actually going down 3.5 and over 1. So there's a decrease of 3.5, but then I am going over 1 there, okay? So my average rate of change is the difference, right? The rise over the run, the change in how the outputs are changing compared to the inputs. So my ARC here is going to be negative 3.5 over 1, which is just negative 3.5. We could have also found the average rate of change by plugging in to the function. So like, for example, if, let me just come over here to the side. So if I'm using this P of X function here and I plug in a 0 to the function, I get a 0. So that tells me the point 0, 0, which is the point that I've marked there on the graph. And then if I find P of 1, okay, I'm just going to go through and everywhere I have an X, I'm going to put a 1. And I would get this output value of the negative 3.5 there. Okay, and you could actually do that calculation if you wanted to see it for yourself. Okay, and so that we could get the, we could get these points by plugging into the function, or we can just get the points by looking at the graph that was provided. It should be the same either way, right? Okay, but anyways, so the average rate of change is negative 3.5. Now, let's talk about how we would interpret this, okay, for like a proper interpretation for average rate of change. First of all, you always want to reference your input values, okay? So we would say between day 0 and day 1, Okay, so I am referencing these input values, okay? And I'm putting the correct unit with them. Those are days, okay? So between day 0 and day 1, all right? My profit, or the profit, is decreasing, and this will be $3.50, okay? Your unit is dollars there. And then we would say per day. Okay, so let's break this down to make sure everybody understands what has to be in there, okay? So first of all, let me get my decimal point back in there. It kind of didn't show up. All right, first of all, since it's negative, we would use the word decreasing, okay? So if it's negative, we're going to say decreasing. If it's positive, we're going to say increasing. Now notice here that I did not continue the negative sign over here in my interpretation. When I use the word decreasing, that is representing the negative. So I wouldn't want to say it's decreasing negative $3.50. Okay, it's just decreasing $3.50. Okay. Now, next, what I want to talk about is the units, okay? We have to make sure that we're putting the units with those input values, right? And we know that our input values are in days, all right? And we have to make sure we're putting that dollar sign in there, okay? Because dollars, all right? And then when you do a slope calculation, I want you to always remember that a slope is always a rise over a run, okay? And that goes back to when you probably first learned about slope, okay? Now, rise always comes from the change in your output values, and your run comes from the change in your X values or your input values. So that triangle means change. So this is change in output over change in input. Okay. So you always want to think about your units that are what are my output and what are my input. And that's what I was referring to up here in this last bullet point. We always use output over input for our units. Okay. So what happened here is my output units are dollars and my input units are day. Okay, that's output over input. So you can see here where I have brought this together. Okay, I'm saying, sorry, not negative, but $3.50 in the dollars, okay, per day. Okay, and that's how I'm representing those units. So you always want to reference your input values because remember, average rate of change is different when you change your input values usually, okay? So you want to reference the input values that you're using. You want to make sure you're bringing in descriptive words like profit, okay, and stuff like that. Increasing or decreasing, and proper units on the average rate of change. So let's just do another one here, okay? So let me get some of these other markings out of here, and so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so the next one, I'm saying average rate of change between 2 and 3, okay? So I'm going to look at, here's 2, obviously, and there's the point on the function that goes with input value of 2. And then my output value of, my input value of 3, I'm sorry, I keep saying that wrong. Here's 3 right there. And if I go up to the function, okay, it's hitting about there, okay. And so this point here, okay, is, sorry, my cursor keeps going in and out there, I apologize. So 2, -4, okay? And this point right here is an input of 3. And you have to be careful with the scale here, right? This is a 1. So this would be a 1.5 right there, okay? Now, if I want to just look at rise over run, okay, which is what a lot of students like to do, I'm just interested in what is the difference in height, right, between those 2 points there. which would be 5.5. Okay, and then you would want to look at the difference in your x values, which is just 1. Okay, so also once again, we could do what I just talked about in the last example, is I could go into the function and I could evaluate it for 2, and I'm going to get a -4, which tells me that the point 2, -4. And then I could go into the function, I could evaluate it for 3, and I get a 1.5, so that would be 3, 1.5. So like I said, either plugging into the function or looking at it visually, all right, somehow or another, you should get to this average rate of change is that 5.5 over 1, which is 5.5. Okay, so now this one with our interpretation, we're going to say between day 2 and day 3. Okay, so we're referencing those input values. Okay, we'll say the profit is increasing because we got a positive. Okay, increasing, and this would be $5.50 per day. Okay, so we have our input values represented with a correct unit there. Okay, we're referencing the profit. We're saying increasing here because it's positive. And then we've got dollars per day. So all of these things have to be in that interpretation when you are properly interpreting an average rate of change. Okay, so now let's talk about how this all goes with our derivatives. Okay, so we've still got this p of x function here, and you can see that you're being given your derivative here. Okay, so they're showing you that p prime of x equals 3/2 x squared minus 4. Okay, now we'll talk about how you get that in other videos and in class and whatnot, but for right now, they're just giving you the derivative. Okay, so you're going to just take that information. All right, and it says since p prime of 1 equals negative 2.5, all right, so they're giving you that information there, right? So that's given. They've just told you what that is. Then this gives us the instantaneous rate of change, IRC, at the x value of 1, okay? So instantaneous rate of change, right? That's because it's the derivative, all right? And the x value of 1 is because that 1 is inside of there, okay? It says if we draw a tangent line on p of x at x equals 1, okay, then the slope of this line will be negative 2.5. All right, so let's go over here to our function and look at this. So here's our x value of 1, and I'm going to go to my function, okay, and I'm not going to be able to draw it very well with the free hand and the slippery pencil and all that mess, but a tangent line, okay, as you can remember, just brushes up against the function in that one spot. So it just barely touches it that one little time, okay? And what we know is that the slope of this is negative 2.5. Okay, because that's what we were told. P prime of 1 equals negative 2.5. So that means the slope of this line, that is a tangent line that touches the function at this x value of 1, would have this slope. Okay, and we actually interpret these very similar to average rate of change. And so that's why we reviewed that, because it's really similar. We would need to reference our input value, okay, and so that would be on day 1, okay, referencing that 1 value. All right, the profit is decreasing because we got a negative, and that would be $2.50 per day. Okay, so once again, we don't want to put the negative with the $2.50, because when we use the word decreasing, it is representing that negative sign. Okay, so maybe make a note of that, so because a lot of students forget that. Note, do not use negative, okay, because you used the word decreasing, all right? And so you can see it's really similar with how you interpret. You only have the one input value to represent there because it's just that X value of 1. But you still use the word profit. You're still going to say either increasing or decreasing, and you still need that dollars per day, right? So it's really similar. So when you understand one, it helps you to understand the other, okay? So now let's look at this next here. It says P prime of 2.5 is 5.375, okay? So what they're showing, let's go back over here to our function. And we're going to think about an X value of 2.5, which would be right in, oops, sorry, this bounced a little bit there. So right in there, okay? And then if we draw a tangent line right there, okay, like I said, it's really hard to draw it visually, but it's only touching the function one time, all right? Although my drawing looks a little different than that, but you guys get the idea. Okay, the slope of that line right there would be 5.375. So that's what that information just told us. Okay, and then when we interpret this, okay, we're going to say, you know, like at 2.5 days. Okay, so this is a little messy there. Let me fix that. At 2.5 days. All right, which, you know, or you could say maybe even something like, it would be appropriate to say like, sorry if I can get this, I can't get that to erase, like halfway between day 2 and day 3. Like it would be okay to say that as well. I mean, just like I said, you need to represent the 2.5. Either way is okay. And then you would say profit is increasing. Okay, and we're just going to round that to 2 decimal places since that's how we generally talk about money. So we would say $5.38 per day. Okay, once again, you need to reference that input value. We need to have that appropriate unit there. We want to reference profit. We want to say the increasing since it's positive, and then we want to represent that dollars per day. All right, and so we have to have all of those parts to correctly interpret this instantaneous rate of change. All right, so I will see you guys in the next video.